something that can help you learn how to study the Bible better is to look for the beginnings and the endings of storylines throughout it. And this applies both to the New Testament and the Old Testament, but it especially applies in the Old Testament when we're talking about how there's types of Christ in the Bible. In the Old Testament, where David slaying Goliath and stuff like that, it sets you up to where it comes into the New Testament with Jesus and the disciples. You begin to see those things tied together. And so if it seems like something gets kind of like unwoven and then kind of left, it's because that's going to be knotted up later. An example of this is that Moses asked God in Exodus 34 to see his face. And God said, "No one may see my face but live." And then you come forward to the New Testament, John and the other New Testament writers begin to say things like that we've seen God's face, that Jesus is the image of the invisible God, and things like that. You're seeing that that's the beginning, and then that's the end. That it's been set up, the table has been set for this, and now we're ready to sit and eat at it. And people have made the argument multiple times that this is a contradiction in the Bible. Atheists and agnostics and people who just don't understand the Bible have said this, that it said, "Can't see me and live." Well, we've seen him. It's because there's time in between. And if you account for that time that's in between two passages, it explains just about every single one of the contradictions that people usually say that exist. Because simply time does pass. And so when someone says, like for instance, that in, I don't know, fill in another book. At the beginning they'll say that there's a problem, and at the end the problem is gone. You wouldn't say that's a contradiction in the text. It's that a goal has been accomplished. You wouldn't say that a person saying they can't fly and then learning to fly later, that them saying that they can fly now is a contradiction either. So look for beginnings and endings like that. Other things would be that you can look for a longing. A lot of these things will create a longing of that person will long for peace and rest, but they live in a nation such as Israel where it's full of conflict. And then when we see heaven, the new Jerusalem descending out of heaven, it says that there's no more weeping, no more crying, no more conflict. There's peace present. It's that they're setting up a want, something that people crave, so that you can connect with them in some ways, but also so that you can see that there's something wrong. And then later, there will be a solution. Another is that throughout Jesus' ministry, you have him doing various things, accomplishing various miracles, and healing various people's injuries and wounds. Just about every single one of those is a tying up of those previous issues. Like when he goes to visit the woman at the well, that's in Samaria. That there was a major social rift between the nation of Israel and the city of Samaria that ties all the way back to the divided kingdom of Israel and Judah that was being reunited in that moment. Another would be that you have the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Herodians that are so opposed to Jesus' ministry throughout his movements and his actions and his miracles and the things that he did. Each one of those represents almost like a political party. And whenever any one of them, a teacher of the law or something, stands up to test him, you can see there's a whole group now that is being represented by that person. Almost like when the press corps in a White House briefing, someone will stand up and ask a question. They're speaking on behalf of a whole organization, let's say CNN or MSNBC or Vice News or whoever. They're speaking on behalf of that organization. That organization has an agenda or priorities, and that question is designed to kind of expose that person's contradictions against that agenda, or that is attempted to, in some instances, to try to trap that candidate or that spokesperson into a little bit of a hole, right? We see this happen all of the time. The same thing is happening when Jesus is dealing with these teachers of the law, these Sadducees, these other individuals. And when Jesus is telling stories, his parables, just about every single one of them is designed to do this as well. They're moral tales. And that when you see that there's a Samaritan going down and helps this other man, a person from on the way to Jericho, that's not by accident. It's not a mistake, right? That when he says that a Levite passes him by on the other side, because what's interesting is that when you're hearing that story, you're supposed to agree with that. When the people who were hearing the story at first, you go through the book of Leviticus, if a person would have touched a dead person, a Levite or a teacher of the law would have touched a person who was dead or someone who had been violated in that way, it would have made them unclean until sundown. They would have had to change their clothes and bathe again in order for them to be able to do their duty. It'd be like if you're a nurse, for instance, you go and you help one patient, you take the gloves off, you will use the hand sanitizer, and then you're going to go to the next person, right? You're not going to just leave the same gloves on from patient to patient to patient. That's dangerous, right? You transmit infection that way, and spiritually as well as physically, there's some aspect of that with Levitical law that you do not touch a dead thing and then try to worship in the house of God. You do not touch something that's been violated and then try to lead others in worship. So when you hear this Levite, we hear it now, like, how dare he walk by, right? We are offended by that. But for Jesus, as he's telling the story, they're like, yeah, of course, yeah, he wouldn't do that. Maybe he'd call some, like the city guard or something to come by and sweep later, but he's not going to do that on his own. That's not his job, you would say. So when the Samaritan comes through, we see him. What happens is you have a little bit of a gut check. At least the original people, they hear him like, oh, that guy, he's probably the thief, or he's like that. He's gonna go and he's gonna try to rob him, is what he's gonna do. And so when that Samaritan helps the man, prepays for his care at the inn, everyone is left slack-jawed because nobody expected that. Nobody expected that turn in the story. No one expects a hobbit to go to Mordor. No one expects a teenager to turn out to be the hero, right? No one expects these things. They're against your expectations. It creates this dramatic irony in the way the story is told, and it allows that point to settle in. It confronts your prejudices, what you expect from those who are leading you and what you expect from those you hate. That's the point of the story. That's the point. And at the end, who was a neighbor to the man who fell among the thieves, right? We think that's about loving my neighbor, so that I am going to love someone else by helping them. Loving your neighbor, thinking that that's the stranger, the person who had fallen among the robbers is the stranger, but he's not. You're the stranger. You're the suspicious one, and that no matter how other people treat you, the expectations they form around you, you have a duty with your love of God to help those who have been victimized. That's the point of the story. But it's a lot harder of a pill to swallow that way.